All right, White House Forum on AA and NHPIs.
Good
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, we're going to begin. We have half an hour. We got a lot to cover. First and foremost, please welcome the incredible Rupi Kaur. Rupi is, of course, an incredible poet, #1, multiple-time New York best-selling author, has probably my favorite live special I've ever seen in my entire life, which you can access online. It's incredible. And is responsible for half of my cries in the last 7 years. Welcome, Rupi, again. All right, next to her is Godfather, actor, producer, statesman, Daniel Day Kim. Give it up. Daniel is not just the leading man of leading men. He is a phenomenally successful producer with a hit broadcast show, and as we all know, on all the things across DC, has committed so much of his time, heart, and work, unlike any other artist I have personally seen, to the cause. Give it up again for Uncle DDK.
Uncle.
Next is Madam Gina Rosero. Give it up for Gina Rosero. A model, activist, author, teaser, soon-to-be successful producer. Ooh. Gina has transformed narratives for the trans community and has a brand new, stunning debut memoir called Horse Barbie that always be selling. How did that happen? The debut's on May 30th. And last but certainly most, Aaron Salah. Please welcome from the CEO of Gravitas Pacifica, Aaron. Aaron's company, Gravitas Pacifica, focuses on harnessing the incredible power and stories of the Native Hawaiian, local Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community across creative industries, so his and their stories are accurately and affirmingly told. Give it up for Aaron. All right, let's begin. So this is the fun panel today, so we need you all to be vocal. I'm gonna start with some softballs so we can ease it up. #1 is succinctly, why did each of you pursue media and entertainment? And what was your first job? We'll start with Rupi.
I feel like I should go first because it's like
Okay, we'll start with Rupi.
I feel like I didn't, it sounds so corny, it chose me, but I was 15 years old, working at Tim Hortons. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. I was 15, I was working at Tim Hortons, which is Canada's version of Dunkin' Donuts, but less hectic. And when I wasn't working or, in high school, I was writing poetry and I was performing it in my local community. And it was really the performing it on stage that made me fall in love with the craft. And I was writing mostly about what it meant to be a South Asian girl growing up in the West. And I've always been a big reader and always hungry for books written by Asian women, which weren't always easy to come by. And there's a famous quote by Toni Morrison. She says that if you find a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, write the book. And I might be butchering that quote, but you get my point. And so I decided that I was going to write the poetry that I wanted to read, and it's been such a beautiful journey to be able to become a published author, tour the world like a musician, and now also write and work within entertainment.
All right.
That's a touching story.
Godfather Kim.
First of all, hi everybody. Aloha, as everyone has been saying, because I'm from Hawaii too. I'm so glad, like when we talk so much about the problems and the issues in our community, that we get a chance to do something like this where we can celebrate how far we've come. So thank you all for being here. I feel so encouraged by all of it.
An extra thank you, by the way, to Rebecca Lee, Grace Choi, as well as Philip and others. Thank you so much to them, especially.
Give it up for
Y'all
Phil,
give it
Kim,
up for
and Jeannie Mai, guys.
Yes.
They've been so great today. Anyway, what was the question being? How did I get here?
Why did you pursue entertainment? So real talk, do y'all remember a show called Lost? This was the man who got all of us dates. So, why did you pursue entertainment, and thank you for your service?
I'm going to be as corny as the previous answer. I'm going to. I went into college as a political science major, planning to be a lawyer, and so, like maybe one or two of you out there, and I love political science. I wanted to learn how our government worked, and I still have a fascination with it. But I took an acting class. somewhere in my sophomore year because I had an elective to burn and I thought, what the heck? 20-something years later, here I am. And that's really how it started. My first job was at a theater called Pan-Asian Repertory in New York City. Do you guys, anyone? Yeah, all right. So Pan-Asian Rep, it's worth me mentioning Pan-Asian Rep because it's one of two theaters in America, or that's not true anymore, but at the time, that focused on Asian Americans. It gave Asian Americans the chance to work on classical plays like Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen. And the first play I ever did professionally was A Doll's House. And I was like 30 years too young to play this role, but I was so lucky to get the opportunity to play someone who is, not from Asia in a classical piece. And it's why these kinds of theaters are so important. As we talk about representation, we have to talk about history. And we cannot forget theaters like East-West Players,
Yes.
Pan-Asian Rep, Ma Yi, Natco. So, yeah, give it up. So that was my first job, and I'm grateful to those theaters because otherwise, who knows how long it would have been before I had worked.
I don't understand how you're 30 years too old when you're 29, but math's not my forte. So, Ms. Rosero, how about you?
Hi, hello. So we started with a poet, so we'll do the word rhyming here. Corny to, I'm gonna start with Quinley, how's that? So it's the month of May. Actually in the Philippines, the month of May is also peak Catholic trans pageant celebration, right? Let me say that because in the Philippines, almost every day during the month of May, there's Catholic fiesta celebrations. And in the Philippines, usually on those 5-day celebration, on the 5th day of that day, usually that falls on a Sunday, the main event for everybody, like a stage like this, is a trans beauty pageant. And usually it's in front of the church, right? And the judges are celebrities and all that, right? So we have that culture. So when I was 15 years old, I was watching one of these pageants, and this woman named Tiger Lily, who's my trans mother, became my mentor, saw me and said, you should join one of these pageants. So I ended up joining my first trans pageant at 15 years old. I ended up winning second runner-up, best in swimsuit, best in long gown. Something simple. And thus, doing pageants and moving to New York City as a fashion model and now producer led me to here I am.
Very good. Mr. Salah.
No leila kavelino ke aloha me o kou pakahi nui ko uhau oli e noho mai me ke ia mau celebrities ma ke ia kahua nei a noho mau ma nei me o kou aloha aloha aloha. I've never ever thought of the work that I do as entertainment. I've always thought of it as storytelling, and storytelling is hard work because the goal of storytelling is to inform life according to worldview. And so in the 90s, I was living in New York in Riverdale studying conducting. If I followed the trajectory of my life, I would be conducting orchestras today. Got on a flight to go home and pack my things and come back to the city permanently. And on the flight, I decided I wanted to live at home. And what that necessitated was a reinvention of the work that I was going to do, of who I was going to be. And I walked into really becoming the MC of a Polynesian review. 1,000 years ago, Tupe, the great Maori navigator, led his people across the ocean. In their migration, they came across a group of islands over which hovered a great and majestic white cloud. Hence the name Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. And so that was, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Someone got that on camera, right?
Arigato. And so what that work in Polynesian Review for Tihati Productions in Waikiki did, Faftai, set, of course, this trajectory toward work that I do in storytelling. And more importantly, it's a Disney word, but I'm going to co-opt it and appropriate it, story living, because the work that we do in storytelling is really, again, informing living of life in a world that is in dire need of really good storytellers. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump around. I want to focus this next form of the conversation on what has changed since you started your creative and storytelling careers, and most importantly, what still needs to change for our community. Rupi, I'll pick on you first, and then we're going to jump around. I distinctly remember majoring in English in undergrad and being asked by everyone, what is it like to be unemployed after you graduate? You have not only made poetry into a very viable career, but a one where you have given language to an entire generation who can reimagine their place. Even Jeannie Mai 20 minutes ago backstage, I think we were all crying. She can share that story maybe. But what has changed since you started your poetic career and narrative career, and what still needs to change systemically?
I would say what's changed is, I guess, the impression of poetry. When I started performing about 13 years ago, and when I self-published my first book in 2014, I remember telling people, like gatekeepers in the industry, oh my God, I want to publish a book of poetry, and I was so naive, and they just laughed, because in their eyes, they were like, there's no market for poetry. That's just not, that's not going to happen. And it was a time where it was still very uncommon for digitally native artists to gain success in the ways that they are right now on places like TikTok and Instagram. And I feel like it was difficult at first because gatekeepers, they couldn't have imagined that a brown girl would write a book that would one day outsell Homer's The Odyssey and become like the highest selling book of poetry of all time.
Yes!
And which is a fact I learned a couple weeks ago, and I think it's so cool, so I'm going to keep saying it until somebody's like, that's not true, but it is. So I'm like, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. And I think what's changed since is that so many of my peers have proven that that's not true. There was this idea that young people don't read poetry and there's no audience for it. But so many of my peers within the community have not only proven that to be untrue, but they've helped to expand the genre, which is really cool. And something in my line of work that I think needs to change is we're at a place where there's a danger of being further silenced because book bans are on the rise exponentially in school districts across America. And so many of these books that are being banned are about our stories written by AAPI and Native Hawaiian authors. They're about our experiences, including my own. And that's really scary. And I think I try to my trick is, one, we gotta continue to celebrate how far we've come and really lean into that joy, and then also use that joy to continue marching upwards toward a more just world.
Very good. Aaron, Ruby invokes a really essential part of narrative change, which is the education system. And as we all know, education is not just in school, it's evergreen. As they say, sometimes we graduate to go back into elementary school as adults. No, in terms of immaturity. And so I guess my question to you is, at a systemic level, the NHPI community, if I'm not mistaken, represents 6% of the global Asian diaspora. It's material, and we both know what the numbers unfortunately look like within storytelling. They're meek. What needs to systematically change for your community as well as our diaspora?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know what's a challenge for me is I've never felt invisible. And that may be because I grew up in a society that is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. I'm all three, check, check, check. Right, and so what's fascinating to me about having grown up and lived inside of a community like Hawaii is that we have found a way, and we negotiate this peace daily, but we have found a way to celebrate each other. We eat each other's food, we go to each other's homes, we sing each other's songs, we dance each other's dances. And so the way that informs what happens in a school, and maybe this is a bit biased just because of my own experience, and I'm ignorant of the experience outside of Hawaii. It's one of the reasons I chose to stay home, is that we have this responsibility to live into the power of our identities. We have this responsibility. My math teacher in 7th grade used to say, you didn't lose your homework. Your homework knows where it is. Your homework has lost you. And so I've really taken that, we haven't lost our identity. Our identity is there. What we have to do is live into it and allow it to be what we need for it to be in order to empower us to be the people that we're supposed to be in a 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 30th century context. And so how that matriculates down into the classroom is that teachers have to afford themselves the power of their own vulnerability to accept that students come with very different experiences and allow those individual experiences to inform the collective success of the whole. And that is an incredibly powerful thing. This is one thing that the US is really, really bad at. The US is really, really bad at vulnerability. And if the US would allow itself to be vulnerable as individuals, individual citizens of the country, I think we would find that the power of that vulnerability provides for us the pathway to much more in authority, much more in empathy, much more in power than we allow ourselves to access now. Because we're afraid. We shouldn't be.
I think we're at church right now. Is it Sunday? Yeah, I'll give it up for Aaron Salah. Daniel, let's talk about another system outside of education, which is the system you occupy and lead in, the studio network and streaming platform ecosystem. I think something that's really rare about you, and you know this, is you're one of the only people who's successfully been in front and behind the camera at the highest levels. It's you and Mindy Kaling, and there's only so few. What still needs to change on that system to ensure that more of our stories and our leadership can take shape?
Well, Bing, you're uniquely equipped to answer this question as well. So I would put the same question to you, but let me contribute first. I would say it's not a one simple answer. It's not a silver bullet answer. There are a lot of things, and I'll just point out a couple of them. One is that we need more executives in the C-suites. No matter how much we push as producers, we're still subject to approval by someone else, by the people who are moneyed. And in my industry, it's studios or independently wealthy billionaires, one or the other. And sometimes that's both, the same thing. But the fact is that, people tend to want to approve stories and see stories that reflect their own experience. And when you don't have people who look like us, who are in the approval seats, then we are asking them to go outside of their own experience to accept our own experience, which is why it's so important for us to speak up about our own experiences and in that specificity find what's universal to everybody, because that's what we can find that's common in our humanity, and that's what everyone can get behind. So that's one of the issues. I think there also is an issue of support. All of you here, we're in a self-selected group. We're all here celebrating today, and I'm sure all of you can remember films like Who Killed Vincent Chin? Helen Zia is here today. And
yes.
Yeah, give it up for Helen Zia. And as monumental a project as that was at that time, it was hard for it to extend beyond the echo chamber of Asian America. So the idea that Asian Americans can support our work and have it reach beyond our own community is really important. And now we're finding that with films like Parasite and Everything Everywhere All at Once. We're no longer saying, right? We're no longer saying, wow, we support this because it's an Asian American film. We're saying we support it because it's a fucking amazing film. So it's about us supporting our own community and showing our pride in who we are, and let that be magnetic, let that be attractive to everyone else, and it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. But really, Bing, I want to put the same question to you, because as the leader of Gold House, you know as much about this as anyone.
I'm really not supposed to speak. It's supposed to be about panelists. But very quick. Agree on executives. I think to shout out a lot of our community, the good news is our executives are putting in the work to make sure they're being inclusive of all traditionally marginalized groups. I'll give you two. The two largest media companies in the world by market cap, specifically on visual change, Netflix and Disney. The two people who greenlight stories and marketing at Disney are Asian women, Bella Bajaria and Marion Lee Dickus. Now, this is powerful because they not only have crushed incredible stories that resonate locally and happen to be for a global audience as well, but Asian women are the least likely demographic to be promoted to management, and yet, look at Bella and Marion. I think the second one is Disney. Newly appointed chief brand officer is Asad Ayaz. This is a queer South Asian man who now controls the single biggest marketing budget in the world for the biggest brands in the world, Marvel to Pixar. That is powerful. right? And this is one of ours. And so I think executives is absolutely one. I think the second is also a mind shift of making sure that not only can we infiltrate, dare I say, or support existing systems, but also have our own, like what you've done with 3AD Media. So you have all these great multicultural leaders who have their own funds, who can greenlight their own projects and tell them very specifically. I think the third piece is allyship gets thrown around like a platitude, but the reality is a lot of our experiences are quite concentric, and the way that we need to solve them are quite concentric. Not to over whatever something, but we're about to announce something at Gold Gala this Saturday with the Latino community. If our two communities can get it together, we will positively, hopefully, influence the next 5 decades of the earth, because we are the fastest, right?
Exponentially.
That's right. And they are often omitted, as we all know, from diversity conversations. Right. And so anyway, so it's a litany of solutions. There's no panacea. I need to stop talking now. Gina Rosero. Something that I love about what Daniel said in invoking everything everywhere all at once is, and the Daniels and Jonathan Wong are on the record for this, is it is so Asian. It is strong because of, not in spite of itself, and it, because of that, is the most awarded film of all time and A24's most lucrative. You as a human being are a beacon because your art is your existence. It is entirely autobiographical. There is no hiding your scripture. So for you, what still needs to change in the industry?
Thank you for that. You know, in storytelling, now as a director, writer, producer, there's this virtue or saying that the personal is universal. I would like to add to that, particularly from the lens and the perspective of a trans woman, as a trans Filipina immigrant, someone who have just written a book who's about to come out on May 30, pre-order. And I'd like to add that the personal is expansive. In this story, in the projects that I'm doing, I care about the character, especially when it's really rooted from their personal truth, right? Because for so long, particularly as a trans Filipina, our stories are told by cisgender people, right? In this moment, as I'm sharing this stage, I'm sitting here, sharing this space as a very proud trans woman, because when I moved to New York City in 2005 as a fashion model, I had to disappear. I had to go stealth. For 8 years, the fashion industry did not know I was trans. My model agent, my business partner, did not know I was trans. And I certainly recognize the degree of privilege to that. But for 8 years, yes, I've achieved all that, right? I was in the business that is all about the power of imagery, but I was not being seen. I was so visible in covers of magazines and billboards, but I was also consciously invisible. It's this dual reality that I was managing, and doing that for 8 years took its toll, emotionally, physically, and all that. And I think as what I'm doing now, and as I'm telling more stories, creating more stories, directing more stories, more so, even in my book, that Horse Barbie that I've written, I wanted to honor the long history of gender fluidity in our AA, PI, Native Hawaiian culture, right? In the Philippines, the Babaylan, the pre-colonial culture, the pre-colonial spiritual leaders, right? The Hijra in India, the Fa'afafine in American Samoa, the Mahu, right? It is in our the Katoys in India, it is in our very DNA, the notion of gender fluidity. We need to honor that, particularly as we're centering stories. What we're seeing right now in anti-trans legislation all over this country, we need to be there for particularly our AAPI trans youth. As I go to places now, as I do interviews and press for my book, people ask me about all that anti-trans legislation. And yes, I acknowledge that. But more so, I think, as a storyteller, I care about the lived experience and the people behind those anti-trans statistics and legislation. And I say this, it's because they see, those people that's trying to take away our humanity, they see our power. Trans, gender non-conforming people has the answer to this rigid binary that we've been led to believe. That's why they're trying to take it away from us. So I just wanted to simply honor that and recognize the power in that in our history.
There it is. As we mentioned earlier, we're so grateful to Rebecca Lee, Phil, Executive Director KAI, and of course Grace Choi for having us at the White House Forum on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders. Because we're in DC and because this is a rare privilege, in 1 minute each, I know you all see the clock, what is your message to DC, whether it's narrative, storytelling, entertainment related, or not?
I would say that we're living in a time where, it's so not interesting, it's horrible, but interesting, like how all of it is happening at once. Books are being banned at alarming rates. Abortion is illegal. Trans rights are being taken away. And it's more important than ever to continue to empower the communities that we serve.
I would say, and this is not just for the entertainment industry, I would ask Washington to catch up. I would, not when it comes to social issues, not just when it comes to social issues, but when it comes to technological issues. Right now, the writers are striking all across the country and one of the issues is technology. We are on the brink and the infancy of AI that will significantly affect all of our lives, and all of the people who are up on this stage will be drastically affected. ChatGPT can write poetry. ChatGPT can write scripts. ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, but other AI programs can put my face on anyone's body. So this is stuff that Washington needs to not only understand, but learn about. And so when they can't understand what a finsta is, they've got a lot of catching up to do. That's what I would say.
DDK, what's your finsta? Gina, go ahead.
It's simple for me. Support trans rights, support trans youth, honor the long history in our culture. It's simple for me and that goes a long way. Thank you.
Mr. Salah.
Just to echo this incredible group of colleagues on this panel, embrace empathy. It is the thing that will guide us into the future. Embrace empathy and understand that the world is bigger than each of us individually.
Aaron Salah, Gina Rosero, Daniel Day Kim, and Ruby Kaur. Please give it up, everyone. Thank you so much again.